This is that segment where we get to review the front pages of national dailies, and as customary, I have a copy of the Daily Trust with me. On the front page, lead story there says, Daily Trust dialogue, masses are losers of Tinubu's reforms. That's according to Labour. A couple of riders underneath says, federal government running prodigal economy. President desirous of making life better for all. That's according to the Information Minister. Now is the time to interrogate renewed hope agenda, according to Kabiru Yusuf, the chairman of the board of the Media Trust Group. And there should be consequences for failure, according to Shamsuddin Usman, a former minister of finance, budget and national planning. Of course, federal government must listen to citizens' perspectives, according to Jega, the former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Other stories there say, police vigilante gunned down kidnapper, rescue 14 victims in the FCT. Also, $3.3 billion emergency loan. You owe Nigerians explanation, Atiku tells Tinubu. Our story is on page 5. Woman jailed 7 years for promoting prostitution. Our story is on page 12. We see a pictorial there of the managing director of the Nigerian Ports Authority, Mohammed Bello Koko, receiving the Comptroller General of the Nigerian Customs Service, Adewale Bashir, at the NPA headquarters in Marina. Of course, the meeting focused on deepening collaboration towards improving efficiency, enhancing speed of cargo clearance to promote competitiveness. At the top of the page, we see Gaza war, ICJ to deliver order on South Africa's application today. Catch that story on page 4. Also, Northern youths demand Kayamo CBN governor sack over relocation of agencies. Read more on that story on page 4. And finally, attempted cattle rustling, major cause of fresh plateau crisis. That's according to the military, and that story is captured on page 3 of the Daily Trust. That's it for the Daily Trust today.
And now let's move on to the nation's newspaper. We'll take this one that says, government labor minimum wage talks for March. All right, page 4 has details of that story. And then why Supreme Court affirmed Fubara Kefas Aliyu victorious. Page 4 has details. Aida Tiwat set to inaugurate at Delami, and presidency tackles Atiku over claim on NNPC's $3.3 billion loan. Page 5 and page 4. 4 and 5 has details of those stories. And you see a pictorial here of different royal fathers at a town hall meeting. You can get details of that. And then beneath that, we have power supply worsens as generation drops to 3,134 megawatt. Riders attached to the story says TCM blames gas shortage. 30 megawatts coming from Kashimbila. And then Enugu community stalls multi-billion naira power project. Start reading from the front page and then continue on page 3. Oinoi of Ibiraland, Tijani Anaje installed. Page 7 has details. And Lagos to float airline build airport in Lekki. Page 3 has details of that story. That's about the stories we'll be taking from the front page of The Nation this morning.
And to The Guardian, on ease of doing business, how checkpoints, bad roads block trade, spike inflation. That's the big story on The Guardian. It's on page 4, 5, and 6. Terrorists kill Imam, 2 others abduct 32 in Katsina. That story is on the news page, number 30. Also, Sanusi backs relocation of CBN departments to Lagos. Catch that story on page 3. Takeaway packs. Lagos maintains stance on styrofoam ban, gives 3 weeks moratorium. Besides that, Atiku queries $3.3 billion emergency loan. Underneath that, we see Ibadan explosion. Federal government gives security agencies 2 weeks to review report. NLC seeks review of Tinubu's policies over unpleasant outcomes. And also, Nigeria needs ambitious fiscal reform to achieve sustainable 3.1% growth. That story is on the business page of The Guardian. And that's some of the stories on the front page of The Guardian this morning.
Now we're headed straight to this Nigeria. Subsidy removal increases FAC disbursement by 29% to 15.1 trillion naira in 2023. Get details on page 19. And bold is screaming for attention here is a kicker with insecurity. Military deploys special forces in trouble spots, says DHQ. And the writer says the armed forces will destroy the cancer of terrorism that is ravaging our country. Troops neutralize 94 terrorists, apprehend 214 in 1 week. Get details of that on page 4. Supreme Court affirms election of Taraba, Sokoto, Rivers governors. Page 14 has details. And over 50% poultry farms shut down in 2023. That's coming from the association. Interesting one there. Get details of that on page 18. And 10 killed, 10 houses razed down in Plateau attack. Police disclosed. Page 15 has details of that very heartbreaking story. And then we have a victory of former Nigerian basketball international Sam Oguche drilling the students during the opening of Abuja Metro High School basketball. All right, get details of that. And then lastly, we have federal government charges 5 Fubara loyalists for burning Rivers Assembly, remanded in Kuje prison. Wow. Page 5 has details of that story.
That's an interesting story. However, on the Nigerian Tribune this morning, the lead story there says, review your policies to reduce hardship. NLC tells Tinubu. Says listening to World Bank, IMF has never helped the country. Wants federal government to expedite process of negotiating new minimum wage. Government to discuss with Labour in March. That's according to the Information Minister. Of course, also, Nigeria spent 14.8 trillion naira on security in 9 years. That's according to PwC. Lists 7 trends that will shape Nigeria's economy in 2024. Permanent solution to insecurity is here, according to Northern leaders. Have stories on page 28 if you want to know what the permanent solutions are. Ijaw Youth Council threatens to shut down Shell operation as Clark alleges plot to colonize Ijaws and others. Stories on page 4. Also, Southwest PDP now fully united. Makinde, other party leaders say. Oyo, Osun governors jointly attend party zonal meeting for the first time. Ajishafe, now Southwest chairman. Also, Lagos malls investment in airline operations. Sanwo-Olu renders stewardship in town hall meeting. Below the masthead, we see some other stories, which includes Ondo Assembly confirms Adelami as deputy governor. Ganduje woos Kanu governor to join APC. That's an interesting headline. Read more on that on page 3. Also, Supreme Court affirms Sokoto, Rivers, Taraba State Governor's election. And atop the page, we see Atiku raises 5 questions over NNPCL's $3.3 billion emergency loan. Says federal government may repay $12 billion. That story is on page 12. And finally, Plateau killings. Police arrest 17 reps speaker to meet Tinubu. Don't take laws into your hand, governor warns. That story is on page 26. Well, these are some of the stories scattered across the front page of the Nigerian Tribune.
All right, the first news will be our last stop, and it seems to be as busy as the Nigerian Tribune. But we'll start with this one that says, Ondo Assembly confirms Akeredolu's kinsman as deputy governor. And Fashwa applauds appointment. Edo gubernatorial. Nobody can intimidate me, says Deputy Governor Shuaibu. Get details of that in the first newspaper. And then customs intercept cocaine and arms worth 4 billion naira. Court remands Fubara's loyalists over Rivers Assembly explosion. DPO rejects bribe. Arrest bandit in Kaduna hotel. CBN, fan relocation. You risk losing northern support. Kasina elders want Tinubu. Interesting one there. And largely, that's Boldly captioned here, speak up on NNPCL's $3.3 billion loan deal. Atiku challenges Tinubu, alleges deal is shady. Interest amounts to $7 billion. Claims SPV Incorporated in Bahamas notorious for Paradise Papers scandal driving deal. Wow. Get details of that in the first news. Supreme Court affirms election victories of Taraba, Sokoto, and Rivers governors. Another story says court stops IGP from arresting EFCC chairman, vacates contempt order. And on African Cup of Nations, which seems to be very interesting to me, Tinubu not impressed with your performance. Minister tells Super Eagles players. All right, let's see what happens with Cameroon in the coming days. Oh, tomorrow, that's the date. And then on Plateau, 16 victims of fresh mango crisis buried. As a DHQ moves to invite CAN chairman for accusing military of aiding killings. And the other writer says rep speaker to meet Tinubu on Plateau killings. And the last story, dump NNPP, defect to APC, Kandridi tells Yusuf and supporters.
Well,
Quite
a lot of stories across the front pages of Nigeria's national dailies, and to do justice in terms of 7 perspectives and also breaking down some of these stories, we have joining us in the studio now Emmanuel Osemeka. He's a public affairs commentator. Welcome, Mr. Emmanuel.
Thank you. Good morning and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year indeed. So let's start perhaps the conversation with this one on the front page of the Daily Trust, and of course was replicated across the other national dailies. It says $3.3 billion emergency loan. Your own Nigerians explanation, Atiku tells Tinubu. So it seems like we're back at it again.
Absolutely. I mean, you see, there's no love lost between the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, and of course, he's a political friend and ally of many
You call them
decades.
allies or adversaries?
Well, they've been allies for many years. They were in the SDP of the 92 days.
Some said they were in the same political school.
They've been in the same political school for many decades. They're friends, actually. Yes, the two of them wanted to be president. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has always wanted to be the #1 citizen of Nigeria.
Just as
from the 90s. He stepped down for, what's his name? The guy, for Abiola.
MQ.
Yeah, for MQ Abiola. Yeah. As far back as 1992, 93 elections. And at the time, he was the political leader of the People's Democratic Movement,
the PDM,
which was the political movement of the late Shehu Musa, General Shehu Musa Yaradua. So,
who some have attributed to being his political god.
yes, I mean, you can't take it away from they are from the same place and Atiku. So, if you take a cursory look at the Tinubu's political journey as well, you will see Atiku right beside him and all that. The famous, what do you call it? What's the company again?
Intel.
Tinubu has about 5% in shares in that Intel at the time. So they've been friends. They've been political allies, business partners and all that. So there's no love lost between the two of them. So when you see this, you will know clearly that Atiku is not new to politics and governance. So he has his tentacles left and right. If you recall, this loan, 3.3 billion loan, was initially mooted sometime last year when the dollar began to spiral. And the idea then was that you have to find a way to stabilize the currency. And one of the drivers of the incessant increase is the lack of inflow. Yes, if you look at 2013 or 2014, Nigeria went as high as having on annual basis about $103 billion annually. And it dropped to the lowest in 2022 to $14 billion. So you can see the gap. So that's one of the reasons why we are not able to
meet up with that.
Exactly. So the challenge first is as long as you wake up every day, you have obligations. So why not take care of the previous ones so that you can stabilize the system and create room for more investment? Because as long as you are not able to meet your obligations, investors will run away. I mean, look at Guinness. Guinness lost about 5 billion and so many other companies like that. So you don't want capital flight. You want companies to come in and invest, and the more investment you get, the better you become and the better your reserve, and you're able to defend the currency. So I believe that's one of the things that was supposed to be. But of course, the initial plan was to borrow the money and pay using crude.
Yeah.
But I think,
was getting to that.
yes, I think they've deviated from that, and a different, so either, because what was said was that the lenders wanted to get direct off-takers for the crude, so that they can get the money. Unfortunately, if you are not a player in the crude industry, it's very difficult to sell. So they now had to broker a different deal. And of course, it looks like, from what Atiku has said, that it's probably going to cost us another 7 billion on interest, which I don't think is a wise decision. But
anyway, a lot of people might interpret this in a different way. And isn't this what we wanted, the opposition holding the government accountable? Isn't this a good thing?
no, absolutely. What the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has done is clearly what an opposition political party should do. However, I also think he could have also profiled what he would have done if he was the president. Because it's not enough to say, oh, come clean. It's more like trying to say, I know what you guys are doing, I'm watching you. That's not what we want.
We want recommendations.
What we want is, look, you borrowed 3.3 billion to do this. At the end of the day, you're going to pay 12 billion for 3.3 billion dollars. If I was the president, this is what I would have done. This would have been the outcome.
Exactly.
We've seen that with a lot of politicians, especially those vying for political positions. They become, magicians.
But then again, does it make
overnight
sense?
And proffering solutions that some people have termed to be unrealistic.
It's the fact that we are used to hearing politicians touting or postulating ideas does not mean that if they become, it will not work. There are clear, policies that if you follow through, it will work. Let me give you a classical example. There's nothing new in governance today. There are countries that have been in Nigeria's current situation and they got out of it. So that's a model you can pick. If you go for your master's degree program or your PhD program, or you go for any of these high level courses, what you look at is actually models. You look at what model worked. When COVID-19 came, how did they get the vaccines? They picked the model of the HIV. It was the HIV antiretroviral model that they used and turned it around specifically for the viral loads that they were seeing from the people who were dying from COVID-19. So the world is about models. So IMF, I will advise Nigeria to go in a particular direction to achieve a specific end that benefits IMF and World Bank and, of course, the owners, the people who dictate for them. That's why it will be foolhardy for any government to take the advice of IMF. IMF was not set up to help Africa grow. IMF was set up to perpetuate Africa in poverty. And that's the truth. You can go check it out. So the reality is, every politician who has offered himself to rule Nigeria and was unable to get there, what you owe Nigerians is to offer us alternatives. This is what I would have done, and so it deepens our democracy, it deepens our knowledge, it deepens, even the students in tertiary institutions will take a cue from some of the postulations you have. And I think there are a few of them that I've been. I look at Professor Mahmoud Jega. He's been churning out a lot of things these days, a lot of intellectual papers. Look at Professor Patu Tommy. He's been very consistent in his ideas and all that. Look at P2B. He's been doing, so Atiku likewise. So I don't think because somebody ran for office and couldn't make it, therefore if he brings up an idea, I think that's what he should do.
Well, Mr. Emmanuel, while all of this is happening, the nation has it that power supply worsens as generation drops to 3,134 megawatts. I came specifically to this because I saw you shake your head in the activity when this headline was read out.
It's disappointing, honestly. We've spent trillions of naira. If I had not spent, we've thrown away trillions of naira, for just to generate, transmit and distribute electricity. Unfortunately, it's become a vicious circle. Electricity generation, transmission and distribution is now looking like rocket science. Even North Korea, that is supposedly under heavy sanction for the past 50 years, they have rockets flying all over the place. So which means they've crossed the threshold of the basics. The people might be poor because of lack of trade and access to quite a lot of things. But for a country like Nigeria to be struggling with electricity generation, transmission and distribution, I'm short of words. It's simple corruption. There's no two ways about it.
Okay, so Nigerians are trying to juxtapose the relationship between power generation and also the selling of the 5 power plants that's going to generate about over $1 billion. And, they're saying that this could actually leave in the power sector, not so vacant, and then help in generation. So how does this even fit? Because the ordinary Nigerian will be asking you, why are we selling our power plants when we have power generation problem in the country? So
most often when you listen to experts or the minister of government people, the excuse usually is that one of the challenges we have is efficiency in running the power system, power infrastructure and all that. But I would say clearly that, I grew up in Nigeria where we had the up-NEPA syndrome. I think the up-NEPA days was better.
Syndrome.
I think the up-NEPA days was better. Well, one of the things, somebody made a joke and said, went from up-NEPA to power holding. So they held the power.
They held the power.
So they've refused to release the power. That, so it's a joke, but when you look critically, you see that what has happened over time is that people have abdicated responsibilities and pushed blames on other people. Don't forget, our former chief of staff went to Germany on a Siemens deal to be able to solve the transmission issue, because the way they claimed was that the problem we had was not generation, that the problem we had was transmission. Now he went to Germany, and unfortunately that trip cost him his life. We've had monies being expended left and right, brought in GE, General Electrics, to come and do the yeoman's job. Unfortunately, we still haven't gotten the results that we desire. We had Siemens come in here for more than 6 years or 7 years to do supposedly yeoman's job, and still it's not being done. We've privatized the distribution companies. We have 6 or thereabouts.
I think we privatized a large part of the value chain.
The value chain. So the challenge of always, which government have said, is that government has no business in business because they don't have the capacity or the efficiency to do business. Now is in the hands of the private sector. The story is that, that the privatization was not properly done. In Nigeria, it's always excuse upon excuse upon excuse. Why? Because we run a system that has no consequence for wrongdoing. The challenge with Nigeria from beginning to end across all sectors is failure to punish people for wrongdoing.
Impunity.
Clearly, we have a government that woke up one day and said they are changing the currency. For whatever it is worth, at the time the explanation sounded nice. But during the implementation, they messed it up. Nobody is being punished for it. You can say that, the former governor of CBN he's been charged for a different set of things.
Not for that.
Not for that. You are in a country where somebody woke up one day and began to steal crude oil. We can't find the people that steal crude oil in ships. And things continue to spiral. We run a country where the former CBN governor the 14th Emir of Kano, clearly said that a young man in the last administration who is less than 30 years owns 2 private jets. Before he got into the last administration, he didn't have a job. He was selling recharge card. That's the country where we are. So that's why you see that when they come up and say, oh, this is the problem, it's a lie.
I think that same young man his name was mentioned as one of the architects of
the currency redesign and the rest of them. And we are here, we're watching. The president came up and removed subsidy with no plans. And the effect of subsidy was not even thought out. The effect of that subsidy removal will hit Nigeria. If you look at what the NESG came up with, you will see that they've segmented the economic recovery process into 4 stages. We're going to be here for another 5 years.
On this issue.
It's going to be worse in the next 2 years. This year and next year is going to be horrible.
But then again, the president and by extension the current administration has been talking so big on the Dangote refinery, the Port Harcourt refinery coming on stream. A lot of Nigerians are actually forgetting that you might not even see petrol at this moment, probably diesel and aviation fuel, but not petrol, which means the problem still persists. The problem persists. The challenge is that we've thrown efficiency, what's the word now? We've sacrificed efficiency on the altar of political patronage. How do you get efficiency? You get efficiency by putting the right mix, right set of people in the right places. If you look at what the Nigerian Economic Summit Group segmented, and if you listen carefully, you will hear the Minister of Finance, the CBN governor, a lot of them talk about that we are currently in what they call stabilization period. The Tinubu's economic policy today on economic recovery is stabilization, consolidation, and what's the other one now? Acceleration. There's one before acceleration. Acceleration comes in about 6 or 7 years' time. And if you look at the stabilization and the consolidation, they are all red. You need to, for you to get Nigeria off this doldrum, you need to get foreign direct investment or public-private investment to the tune where Nigeria will make a minimum of $120 billion annually.
But how do we try doing that?
Today we are doing less than $10 billion annually.
How do we now, is there a hypodermic needle, for example, that you could use to stimulate this development? Because we know a bulk of this has to come from production.
I'm not a politician, so I might not be able to postulate a lot. But as a statistician, as a trained statistician, there are clear low-hanging fruits. But you see, the government, the politicians are not interested in low-hanging fruits.
That's where political will comes
in. Yes, so there are clear low-hanging fruits. So you have a debt in foreign direct investment. So why do you have a debt in foreign direct investment? Lack of direction, lack of confidence. The Nigerian entrepreneurs are closing shops because they lack confidence in the system. How do you build confidence in the system? There is one of the things, if you look at what the Nigerian Economic Summit Group clearly brought out all the facts.
It seemed like it was quite comprehensive.
It was very comprehensive. If you take a look at what they brought out, you will clearly see where the challenge is. So, for example, multiple taxation, okay? Multiple agency regulations, certification. Okay, let me give you a classical example. There is a rule or procedures for capital importation. But in Nigeria today, there is no clear procedures for capital exportation. These are very minute things.
What comes to my mind is that it makes it quite easy for the importers and quite difficult for those who are even seeking to get the foreign direct investment.
That's the point. So there's a whole lot of policy misdirection. There's a lot of policy confusion. So even the private sector is confused as to where the government is going. The government says this, but when you look, you see a different thing entirely. The bribery level for you to get approval for the simplest things is so complex and confusing. The police will stop you on the road for the most mundane things and you must bribe.
What about getting passports to travel?
So there are so many things that have become so complex in Nigeria, made worse from the last administration, and getting more confused with this administration.
It's getting compounded.
You know, so unfortunately, I mean, I don't know their plans. I'm not seeing probably what they are seeing, but with what I'm seeing, I've not seen the gleam of light yet.
Okay, and one would wonder, you know, a country who is diversifying into the usage of gas more because of the removal of first subsidies, talking about shortage of gas for transmission or generation of power, and seeing how that is going to work out. But your thoughts on African Cup of Nations? The president said they're not happy with the performance of the Super Eagles. What do you think will happen tomorrow when we meet Cameroon?
Nigeria will beat Cameroon, not because of president.
I like that
like
optimism.
that
You spoke
answer.
like a true patriotic.
No, Nigeria will beat Cameroon.
But you are sounding like...
Osimhen will
For
score.
me, Cameroon, watch out. It's going to be a field day.
No, Osimhen will score.
You should
Osimhen will break
you
the
should
deadlock
expect
tomorrow.
Serious beatings. Expected.
I think it's going to be like 2-0, you know.
Yeah, specific predictions. I like that. But then again,
You know, I'm a man of faith.
Yeah.
on the
Yes.
Tribune, review your policies to reduce hardship. NLC tells Tinubu, says listening to World Bank, IMF has never helped the country. Wants federal government to expedite process of negotiating new minimum wage. Government to discuss with Labour in March. Now, Mr. Osemeka, I know you've spoken about some of these things, especially the IMF and then the lack of policy direction and coordination. But Nigerians will continue to bear the brunt of all of this. For example, you know, the fuel price has increased. Inflation is now roughly around 29%, and salaries
It's actually
and the minimum
31%,
wage,
yeah.
31%. Salaries are what it is.
30,000.
So the inflation at this point is seeming like a point.
It's, I don't know, honestly. Like someone was saying that the Japa syndrome, you know, is not the solution. And I asked the person, what
What is the solution?
It's okay to accuse, you know, the brain drain and the Japa syndrome. It's not even easy to Japa in the first place.
True.
It's not.
Because flight tickets now cost around 2.5 million.
You're talking
Even
about
more
flight.
than that,
You're talking
for some.
about flight ticket. You're talking about cost of living. When you relocate from Abuja
But you
to
will travel
Kogi.
first.
No, relocate from Abuja to Kogi.
Okay.
Or relocate from Abuja to Lagos.
So to Japa
That's Japa from
within-
Abuja.
within
Yes.
Nigeria
Within
is even-
Nigeria.
Japa is not easy. I moved from Abuja to Maiduguri some time back, and I knew how difficult it was in the first place. First, you're in a place where you've never been before, or maybe you've been there, but you've never really lived. You know, there's a difference between you're visiting and that you're coming to live. So you become part of that place. So the way you behave is now different because culturally you have to adapt. You know, you have to change a lot of things. Your dressing has to change. Your pattern of life has to change. You know, and all that. You have to. So if there are insecurities, you have to brace yourself for whatever you're going to see. If there is cold, you have to brace yourself. Like in Borno today now, you have to wear winter jacket. That's the truth in Nigeria.
Indeed.
But people don't know that you can go to some part of Nigeria and wear serious winter jacket, you know, but they don't get it. So we have our own winter here. But my take is this. The federal government, maybe in a bid to show that they are a departure from the previous administration, churned out a lot of policies that is affecting the workers. What they need to do, first of all, increase the minimum wage immediately. The National Assembly has to make that law immediately, to increase the minimum wage. Labour is asking for 200 or 250. Meet them somewhere. Find a way around this thing. Ramp up production. It's all about production. That's the only way you can get out of this
I
mess.
think we have
It's
to wait
all
till March
about
before that
production,
starts.
production. And that's the most we can take on the Daybreak this morning. Emmanuel Semeka, Public Affairs Analyst, thank you so much for the perspectives.
Thank you,
and of course, for the optimism that Nigeria is going to thrash Cameroon. Watch out. For me, it's thank you very much for watching the program and have a lovely weekend. I'm Sagir Ibrahim.